Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV Whiskey 1. Good vibrations. And sometimes maybe not so good vibrations, as I have a little story for you. I believe I told it elsewhere on my channel, but I accompanied it with technical descriptions and schematic diagrams. Preface this video: do not try this. Never try this. Electronic equipment these days is a lot more sensitive than it was back in 1979. When I lived in West Hartford, Connecticut, worked in the technical department of the ARRL as an assistant technical editor for QST. And I lived in an apartment complex where there were certain problems with the heating and other problems occasionally with loud stereo noise, courtesy of a guy on the first floor. I was all the way up on the top floor, the third floor. But the landlord was great. He let me put a 10-meter Yagi on the roof, and I worked in New Zealand with 3 watts. This is kind of a story evolving, and I guess if you're a radio ham, you'll kind of appreciate this, this little technical bit of mischief. One night, this guy was playing his stereo, and it was making, you know how the bass reverberates through everything? And it just, it was a little much for me. I thought, this is not a college dormitory here. We're professionals living in a 6-unit apartment house. So I went downstairs and knocked on his door and asked him, would you mind turning that down a little bit? And he just looked at me and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I thought, okay, wow. Here in Connecticut, they just tell you, go buzz off and keep doing whatever they want to do. Back here in South Dakota, or in the Dakota Territory, they'd probably tell you, oh, sure, we'll turn it down. And then just still leave it up. But the point of the matter is, I got a little bit peeved by his attitude. Now, up in my apartment, I had an old Drake T4X and R4A. Now, if you remember, the T4X was capable of transmitting AM. And I had a Johnson Viking matchbox that could match just about anything. And I had a couple of .001 microfarad capacitors. So I took the balanced output of that transmatch, connected the .001 microfarad capacitor in series with each of the terminals, and then ran one wire to the negative or the ground or neutral side of the electrical outlet nearest by, and the other .001 microfarad capacitor to the hot side. I believe these were 2 wire system in this house, so there was no definite ground that I could rely on, but I just connected the matchbox up and tuned her up low power into this outlet so that I was electrifying or RFifying the electrical system in that house. Now, these days, of course, with all the sensitive electronic apparatus we have, that could do a lot of damage to a lot of people's stuff. Not to mention the house system itself. So don't do that. In fact, I think it was rather stupid back then, but I was angry. And I had a little bit of technical knowledge. And believe it or not, you know, now, I wonder what Doug DeMaw, my top boss, W1FB, would have had to say about this particular little act of mischief. I wonder what my immediate boss, Jerry Hall, K1TD, would have had to say about it. But none of them ever found out. And I don't know whether anybody else at ARRL headquarters ever engaged in shenanigans like this. Do you think maybe they might have? I have no clue. Do you think they do today? I wouldn't know. But I did. I tuned that Drake up for about medium power with relatively low modulation so there wouldn't be any distortion. And I decided I was going to tell this guy something between numbers on his stereo when they had those periods of silence. Now, as you know, solid-state stereo equipment can be quite vulnerable to RFI or EMI from amateur radio equipment. But single sideband wouldn't have worked. It would have just sounded like SSB in AM mode on any receiver. You wouldn't have been able to understand the voice. CW wouldn't have worked. Just a bunch of clicks and pops, and he'd never have a clue where it was coming from. But AM would work. He'd hear my voice and understand it if my scheme worked. In his stereo. So when I heard a period of silence indicating that one number had ended on his 33 RPM vinyl disc, and the next one was about to begin in a few seconds, I said, God has sent me, the angel Gabriel, to tell you to turn that bloody stereo down. You're interfering with our sleep up here. Damned if that didn't end the problem. I didn't hear any more of that noise all evening long. I'm kind of proud of myself that I pulled that stunt, but again, I'd say don't you dare do it. And I will take no responsibility if you're stupid enough to ever try anything like loading up a transmitter into the electrical system of your house. But back then it was an antiquated house, and there wasn't much damage to be done by 15 or 20 or 30 watts. But I imagine the guy probably got the message. Why else would his stubborn attitude have so suddenly appeared to change? Stan Gibalisco Whiskey 1. Gross vibrations. Signing off for now from Dakota Toriteri, United States of Avarice. 73, and so long for now. Bye-bye.